he sat down with me and he said, I want to know your goals. Like, what do you want to be able to do? And he said, I don't want you to answer that right now. Like, I just want you to think about it, because you're going to be here long enough that I want to help you reach these goals. And I was like, okay. And he stood up and he went to walk out of the room. And I told him, I said, Dr. Guy, I already know what I want. And he was like, how do you know what you want? You know, I mean, you're a 29-year-old man, just lost both your arms, just found out. Like, what do you know? What do you know you want out of life? And I told him, I was like, man, I don't know if I'll ever be able to dress myself or feed myself or do whatever, but I said, I got to be able to hold my kids again. Like, that's all I care about.
Before we dive in, just a quick favor. If you're enjoying what we're doing at Angels Among Us, please take a second to rate and review the show. And if something in today's episode touches your heart, please share it with a friend. Welcome to Angels Among Us, the podcast where we share real stories of angelic encounters. Each episode, you'll hear firsthand accounts of divine protection, guidance, and miraculous interventions that remind us we're never truly alone. Whether through a whisper of comfort, an unseen hand of protection, or an unmistakable presence, angels are closer than we think. Join us as we explore these powerful experiences of angels, both seen and unseen.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Angels Among Us. We are so excited to have Jason here with us. If you don't know Jason, I can guarantee you after you're done listening to this episode, you're going to go look up a bunch of information on this man. He is an incredible human being. We were introduced to Jason through another podcast called the Miracle Files podcast. We'll give them a little shout out.
Shout out to them.
If you need another awesome podcast to go listen to them after you listen to us, of course. But I heard Jason's story on there. I reached out to them, asked if they'd be okay if we got in contact with Jason. I think they reached out to you, right, to make sure that you were comfortable with it. And then, Jason and I had a conversation on the phone a few days ago for about 30 minutes or so. Awesome. Made my day. And, and y'all will see why here pretty soon. When Jason starts talking, you'll be able to hear that we are from different parts of the country. But that's one of my favorite accents, if you can call it that, I guess.
Brent wishes that he had your accent.
Oh, yeah.
I wish I was a little more Southern, for sure.
I tell people I'm from New York.
And then they do a double take and like, no, you're not. All right. Well, I'll turn it over to you, Jason. You can introduce yourself really quick and then just go ahead and get going on your story.
Yeah. So my name's Jason Koger. I'm from Owensboro, Kentucky. I was born and raised in the country on my grandfather's farm, and that'll kind of lead into the beginning of my story before I get into my accident. So I was raised, I don't know, like five miles from Owensboro, a little place called Utica, Kentucky is actually what it's called. But where I was raised up, it's my mom and dad's house, and then next door was my uncle, and I had a cousin that was my age that lived there. Next door to him was my grandfather, and then right next door to my grandfather's my other uncle, and I had a cousin that was 1 year older than us. And then my grandparents farmed 2,300 acres of corn and soybeans kind of around my house. And so we was kind of raised up a little bit different than some people, we just kind of like had our own little compound,
That's awesome.
And so I've lived out here my whole life, and my dad was actually a drill sergeant in the Army. So growing up, a little backstory, growing up, my dad was pretty poor, and he's been a self-provider since he was 13 years old. And, when I watched my dad start the company that he started and the work that he put into this company, and I really didn't realize until after my accident of him teaching us that you never give up. You always keep going forward. No matter through the hard times, the good times, the bad times, whatever, you just keep working, right? You just keep on and keep going. And you start, you pick out something that you want, a goal in life, and you try to reach it. And sometimes, and I'll get into this later on too, but sometimes we think that we have a goal that we want to achieve, but God has different plans for us at times too. And you might not reach that goal. And sometimes I think that's what's hard on some people, that they have this goal, they have this thing that they feel like is what they are meant to do. And then God has a complete different goal, a different plan for you. And that's the hardest part for some people, is realizing that even in the bad, that God's got a good plan, you know? And, I think that everybody will learn that kind of from my story, because my story was completely different than what it was that I thought it was gonna be. But I graduated. I worked for my dad ever since I was old enough to be able to work. And then when I say that, like, I mean literally sweeping the floors when I was 5, 6 years old. And graduated high school. Decided that I was going to go straight into the workforce with my dad. He owned his own company, so kind of already had a job, and started working for him. And didn't take very long. I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a little break out of this. So I got into Murray State University, and I decided that I was going to try to take a bunch of extra classes that would help in my dad's business. But I actually got an engineering degree in Murray State University, and I tell people all the time that the one class that I failed was actually public speaking, and I'm not joking. But now I get in front of people all the time and kind of share my story, and that's another one of them God things. And he was like, "No, I mean, you might have failed it, but you're still going to come out here and tell your story." So, uh, but while I was in Murray, I met a girl, and her name's Jenny. And man, she's actually from my hometown, but she went to a different high school, and I never knew her. You know, when we lived in Owensboro, and Owensboro's not a huge place, but I knew that she was somebody that I loved, and got along with. And so anyway, after I graduated, we came back home, and we started dating, and dated for a pretty long time. And then while we were dating, Jenny's dad passed away with a massive heart attack. And I was with Jenny whenever he passed. And so that was the first thing that her and I went through that was pretty tough on her. And I stayed by her side. And Jenny's faith has always just been, and I've always gone to church. I've always had faith too. I've always raised up in church. But man, Jenny's like this angel from above that was kind of put in my life. You know what I mean? And it was just a great person. And so we started talking about getting married eventually, and we ended up getting engaged. And after we got engaged, I'd already told her kind of some of the plans that I wanted in my life. And I told her, I'm gonna always work for my dad, and one of these days I'll probably own this business. But I want to raise my family the way I was raised, and I want to live out in the county, on this farm. And she was like, "Okay, that's fine." But temporary, when we first got married, I bought a house in Owensboro, and it was a little 700 square foot home. I was the first one we started in, and she was like, "Man, this house is tight." It was a 3 bedroom. We actually turned it into 2 bedrooms and a closet. Is pretty much what we had. And we started talking about kids, and she wanted 4 kids, is what she wanted. And we waited till that time that she was ready to start. And we decided that, hey, it's time. We're ready. We kind of got our life going now. And it was a few years after we got married. And so we decided it was time to try to start having kids. And we got pregnant and had our first daughter. Her name's Billy Grace. And so Billy Grace was born. And then I told Jenny, I was like, I'd like to wait a little bit of time before we have a second child. And Jenny said, "Yeah, like, we can't have any more kids while we're at this house. It's not enough room at this house. So before we have another child, we got to go somewhere." And I said, "All right." So anyway, Jenny called me one day. I was at work. She said, "Hey, Jay," and this kind of a little bit of a fast forward. She said, "Jason, I need you to come home. We need to talk." I was like, "Okay." So I came home at lunch. I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "I'm pregnant again." Wow, that was quick. So my 2 daughters, they're 18 months apart. But at that moment, Jenny said, "It's time, we have to do something before this baby is born." So I came out here to my mom and dad's house in the county. And basically, I kicked my mom and dad out of their house, told them they had to leave. And So I bought my mom and dad's house, and I live where I was raised up. Um, so we move out here, and at that time, I was in the construction field, and I was a union pipe fitter, and we were working at a place called TVA. And around that time, we were starting to work a lot of hours. I was working 7/12s for almost a year, so 7 days a week, 12-hour days. I'm saving so much money because I don't even have time to spend it. And plus, when you're in the union and you're already making a really good wage, but then overtime, holiday pay. I mean, like, man, I was really, really doing very well. So fast forward to March 1st of 2008. It was the first warm day of the year, and it was one of the first days that I was off work. Billy Grace was 21 months old. Campbell Koger, that's my second daughter. She was 3 months old at this time. And I was off work, and the night before was on a Friday night. I told my wife, I said, in the morning, I want to get up. And I said, I'm going to take the girls to the mall in town because they had this little train ride you could go on. And I said, I want to take them to town to do something with them, and then I'm going to bring them home, and I want to give them a nap. I haven't laid them down for a nap in a long time. And then I'm going to try to get caught up with some honeydew projects around the house. And so we went to Owensboro that morning. We went to the mall. I took them on this little ride. We got home. It was starting to get to about, nap time. I laid both girls down for a nap. And I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm going to go on a quick four-wheeler ride around the farm. And when I say around the farm, so beside my house, it's literally a U shape, and it ends up at my grandfather's house. And it is like less than a quarter of a mile, right? And I told her, I said, I'm going to go on a quick ride, and then I'm going to start on my chores. And she said, all right. Well, her brother and fiance at the time had came out here because my wife was a graphic design major, and she was going to make their wedding invitations is what she was doing. So I took off, got on the four-wheeler. I was 29 years old. I've been around this farm millions of times for 29 years, right? I know this farm in the back of my head. Like I tell people, when you're inside your home and you get up out of bed in the middle of the night to go use the bathroom, you can walk to the bathroom without turning the light on. You don't trip over anything. You know where everything is. Well, I felt like this around my farm, right? So I took off. I headed out. I was heading south. Turned to the left. Is the only place you turned. Like I said, the road was a U shape. Turned to the left. The next left-hand corner, which heads up towards my grandfather's house, there's a culvert there. That's the only place you can cross. And right past it is kind of a hill, and it's a cornfield. So the corn was still, it had been cut, but you know how the corn stubbles are about a foot tall, right? So the sun was coming from that side, and I kind of got to that point where I was going to turn left, and I was looking to my right, and I noticed that I wasn't paying a lot of attention. I was just kind of looking around, right? Because I was going super slow. And I turned to look in front of me, and I seen this wire. And I hit my brakes, and I stopped, and I ran, and I slid into this wire that hit the front rack of my four-wheeler. And it basically bounced backwards. And when it came back, it kind of jumped over my handlebars, hit me in the chest, and landed on top of my gas tank between my body and the four-wheeler. And I sat there and I looked, and I noticed that it was a down power line. It didn't do anything to me. I started thinking, I was like, I'm glad, I didn't get electrocuted, right? I'm super thankful for that. And I looked to my right, and those lines went to a field pump, which takes water out of a field. Well, there's no crops out in March. So I was like, maybe somebody turned the power off. There's no power to it at all. And then I got to thinking, I was like, I don't know what to do. And I looked over at the field, and I could see my cousin. So I got a hold of my cousin, and I said, man, I need you to come down here. I said, there's a down power line. And at that moment, I literally getting electrocuted was not even in my mind, right? Like it would have already did it, something. And so my cousin drove back to the back of the farm, and he was behind me, and I was talking to him, and I was like, man, I don't know why it's down, and I happened to look to the left where the telephone pole was, and you know what the guide wire is, which holds the pole up. The guide wire broke, so the pole was actually leaning, which made the two lines swoop, and the lowest point was where I was, and those lines were about 30 inches off the ground. So I told my cousin, I was like, man, I've already been into it. I don't know what to do. I said, I'm afraid there's going to be some kids in the neighborhood riding four-wheelers or dirt bikes, and if they're wide open, I was really worried about somebody getting decapitated. That's what I was worried about, because it was just low enough. And I had already, at that moment, I picked the line up, and I backed off of it. I let go of it. So it was right in front of my handlebars, or right in front of the front rack of my four-wheeler. And I was turned around looking at my cousin. I was talking to him, and I said, man, I wish that these lines were just this high. And I literally I threw my arm up in the air and was kind of waving my arm, like, saying, I wish it was this high. And at that moment, I felt the vibration go through my body. I took 7,200 volts of electricity. And when you take 7,200 volts, is actually more than the electric chair. Electric chair is only 6,900 volts. But you usually, a power line will stay energized for 30 seconds and then it'll shut off. And then, like, if you were draped on top of it, or if I was still holding it, let's say, it goes off for 30 seconds, it comes back on. And it does that until it gets rid of whatever foreign object is on it. So if it was a tree limb, that's why tree limbs would catch on fire. So I took 7,200 volts for 30 seconds. Power went off, completely shut my entire neighborhood down. Now I'm going to back up just for a minute, because I told you that my wife was at home and she was working on these wedding invitations for my sister-in-law. And you start thinking, like, our lives are so busy that sometimes we don't think about others, right? You're in a busy, and you go to a restaurant for lunch and you only get a 30-minute break, and you got a retired guy, girl, whatever, that's taking an hour to order, and then you start throwing a fit, but you don't know if that person had just had a doctor's appointment. You don't know what they're going through, right? So I think back to this all the time. Here my wife had been working on wedding invitations for days, hours, and she's on the computer, and then all of a sudden everything goes off. She loses everything that she had done, right? You can only imagine sometimes you get angry, and it's like, I just worked so many hours on this project, and now I lost it all. You know what I mean? But what she didn't know until she got that phone call was, when it went off and came back on, that her husband was less than a few hundred yards away dying. You know what I mean? And it kind of puts it in perspective. Is like, sometimes the things that we go through and that happens in our lives, it's not worth worrying about. You know what I mean? Like, she just lost a couple hours of work when she's, a few hundred yards. She hadn't got the phone call yet, right? So,
Can I ask a quick question,
yep.
Jason? So you didn't actually touch the power line at that point. You were just waving it and the electricity jumped. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yep. Well, that's what they say. I don't know if I touched it or not. My cousin didn't think I did. So, I don't know. I guess I could have. I ain't gonna say I didn't, but I don't think I did. But when I took that 7,200 volts of electricity for 30 seconds, my heart completely stopped for 30 seconds. And as soon as the power came back on, or shut off, it threw me off the back of the four-wheeler. I hit the ground hard enough that it started my heart back up. And I immediately woke up, because obviously when your heart stopped, you're not awake. So I was unconscious for 30 seconds probably. I hit the ground. I woke up. Immediately felt like I was on fire. It just felt like everything on the inside was burning. And there was a ditch beside me. I was trying to climb down into the ditch, and my cousin kept on grabbing me and pulling me up. Finally, he had already called his dad, my uncle that lived in the neighborhood too. And I remember seeing my uncle coming down in his vehicle as fast as he could. They had called 911. My other cousin, so my uncle, when he got down there, he just kind of held me in his lap. My other cousin had seen all the commotion going on. So he got on his four-wheeler, came down there, And when he got down there, he went down there just very long at all, and he turned around, went back towards the road to show the ambulance where I was, because you couldn't see where I was from the road. So when my cousin got to the road, waiting on the ambulance, he called my mom and dad. My mom and dad lived in town. And he told my mom and dad, he said, Jason has been hurt and he's fixing to go to the hospital. And my mom said, is Jenny with him? And my cousin's like, no, not with him. And have you found Jenny? And he said, no. And he said, have you called Jenny? And my cousin was like, no. And my mom was like, is he okay? And my cousin just kind of was silent. And then finally my mom got the nerve to say, is he still alive? And Charlie was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. So my cousin didn't want to call Jenny because he didn't want her to go back there. My mom ended up calling Jenny, asking Jenny if she knew where I was. And, she said no. And like, he's been in a really bad accident. So Jenny the girls were taking a nap. My sister-in-law stayed here. My wife went out the front door. My next door neighbor actually seen her running out. So he came running over. What's going on? And they jumped in my truck, came back around the backside of the farm. And by that time, the ambulance been there. They were loading me up into the ambulance. Jenny got in the ambulance with me. And at that moment, I was already wrapped up on my left arm. And I remember looking down and looking at my left thumb. That's where electricity came out. And it actually basically blew my thumb off. And I knew that I was going to lose my thumb. And so Jenny got in the ambulance with me. We're heading to Owensboro. And I told her, I said, hey, I'm going to lose my thumb. And I probably should have said this earlier, but my grandfather lived, down the road from me where I was, the direction I was going. He actually passed away a few months before I got hurt. And my grandfather was a single arm amputee. And he got his arm caught in a corn picker. And he was 29 years old, and it was his left hand. So I told my wife in the ambulance, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to lose my thumb. It's not that big of a deal. Papa lost his entire arm. Like, I'm not going to complain about this, And I say that in a way that I was like kind of chill and calm, but I was in a lot of pain, So I get to Owensboro Hospital. I go in the emergency room. I have doctors running in and out of the hospital into my room. And about the time a surgeon comes in and he says, hey, we got to get you out of here. He said, I got life flight on its way, and you're either going to go to Louisville to the burn unit, or you're going to go to Nashville, Tennessee to Vanderbilt. And I said, well, I want to go to Vanderbilt. And the only reason is because some of my dad's doctors were in Vanderbilt. I know a lot of people around Vanderbilt. And I said, I want to go to Vanderbilt. And they said, it's whoever calls us back first. Like, we got to get you out of here now. Nobody tells me anything else. So I get, the helicopter lands on top of the hospital. They take me up in an elevator. And I remember the back door of the helicopter opens up, the entire back door, right? Like a ramp. And they wheeled me in feet first. I remember my feet were touching the front windshield. When they shut it, there was a bench behind me. There was a nurse to sit right there, and I was basically laying in her lap, looking up at her. There was a nurse to my right, and then there's all the equipment to keep somebody alive in life flight. I had my left shoulder was touching the window of the helicopter. We get in the air, and they said, we're going to Vanderbilt. From Owensboro to Vanderbilt is south. And I remember flying over top of my house and looking down and just still seeing people, the firemen and everybody that was down here. I remember seeing them while I was heading to Nashville. So one of the nurses said, Jason, we got to get you prepped and ready for surgery. And I kept on saying, like, why are we going to Nashville? It's just my thumb. You know what I mean? Like, that's all. I just kept on. I don't even understand what's going on. So they told me, they said, we need to go on a cath you. So they cathed me in a helicopter. And I remember the urine bag being right beside me. And I remember seeing the liquid going through that tube, and it looked like Dr. Pepper. And I had no idea what that was at the time. But what it was is when you get electrocuted, it actually burns you from the inside out. and then whenever you're burnt on the inside, it causes poisonous toxins and blood, and it has to go somewhere, and the only place it can go is through your kidneys. So my kidneys were actually shutting down, is what was going on. And then they told me, they said, we're going to go on and stick a needle in your jugular vein, basically. And so they went on and put a needle in the side of my jugular vein, and that would be a way for them to put me to sleep once I got to Vanderbilt. And but I remember getting to the hospital. I remember landing, getting in an elevator, going down an elevator. I remember elevator doors opening up, and another one of my cousins that actually lives in Vanderbilt or in Nashville was called, and she made it to the hospital before any of my family, because Nashville's 2 hour drive from us. And so I remember seeing my cousin, her name's Hadley, and she looked at me and she just kissed me on the head and was like, everything's gonna be okay. I still had no idea. Like, I was like, I don't even know why I'm here. So I go into a room that looked like a morgue. And at that time, it was like, I don't know what you see when you're fixing to die, but I was like, man, is this what you see? Like, everything was stainless steel, bright lights, and I had no clue where I was. That room was called Hydro. And Hydro is where they actually take a pressure washer and they wash your dead skin off of you. They they could not do that with me under anesthesia, because my wife hadn't got there to sign release forms, whether they was going to do surgery or not or whatever. They had to wait on somebody to sign something. So they did that with me completely awake. It was my whole right arm, so my whole right arm was third-degree burns, and I didn't even really realize that, but they washed all that off. And luckily, they make medication to make you forget what you went through, because I remember the room, but I don't remember the pain and the stuff I went through. But I'm still friends with all the doctors and nurses that I dealt with, and I mean, they kept on telling me that you kept on saying, like, it's just my thumb, like you were talking to us the whole time. And so my wife gets down there, my mom, my dad, everybody, and you can only imagine that. I think my wife felt the exact same way I did. It's like, I don't even know why he's going to Nashville. Didn't think it was that serious. And Jenny gets down there, and the doctor walks into the waiting room, and he was like, hey, listen, I need you to sign release forms. I need you to sign a release form for me to amputate whatever I have to amputate, and I don't know what that will be until I go in, and to give him a blood transfusion. And he said, if you don't sign these papers within the next couple minutes, your husband's going to die, because his kidneys are so far gone. And I don't even know if we'll save him anyway. So anyway, Jenny was like, obviously, sign away. You know what I mean? Like, he still, I mean, gotta be a dad, gotta be here. So, excuse me. So, she signed the papers. I immediately went to surgery. And I mean, surgery was probably 4 or 5 hours, 6 hours. I mean, it was a long time. So they amputated my right arm right off the bat. He knew it was damaged bad enough, so he amputated it. And then on my left arm, he went, and the left arm's the one that my thumb was pretty much gone. He cut me from my elbow all the way down to the end of my hand. And when he opened it up, he said that it looked like a shotgun had went off on the inside of my arm. He said that all 10 of my tendons that attach to the tip of your fingers, all 10 of them were wrapped around my wrist. So I took all that power. It was almost like breaking a rubber band. And then, the rubber band, if you're holding a rubber band tight, once it shoots down, it's just raveled up around your wrist. So my hand would have never worked anyway, but that's not why they amputated. But once he got in, he seen all the infection and he amputated. He put me into an induced coma, and I was in a coma for 3 days. And every single day for 3 days, they amputated just a little bit more until my kidneys would start straightening up. I didn't even tell this when I was electrocuted. The electricity went through my body and it came out the right foot, and it did not do anything to my foot. I had an exit wound, but it kind of cauterized itself up. But just for people to understand, They found my tennis shoe 30 feet from where I was. It completely blew it off of my foot. Um, I had a long sleeve t-shirt on, and the whole right arm of my t-shirt, I don't know if it melted to my skin or what, but it's completely shredded, you know. They cut my pants off of me, and I still have my clothes that I had on. They cut my pants off of me, and you can see like little cigarette looking burn holes all through. So that was sparks coming off of me. Literally, my cousin said it looked like a 4th of July was coming off my body, you know, and for him, he don't even like talking about it, right? Because what he seen was like, I mean, he watched his cousin, he thought was dead, dying, you know. So, so I was in a coma for 3 days. And for 3 days, you know, my wife and my mom, my dad, here they are starting to think about like, how are we going to tell him? You know what I mean? Like, how are we going to explain to him about his hands? We're going to look into prosthetics. How's he going to feed himself, dress himself, you know, provide for his family? I mean, like, dude, you can think of a million questions that was probably going on, you know? And so on the third day, Dr. Guy was my doctor. And Dr. Guy's like, I'm going to let him come out of this coma. And Jenny, and it's another blessing. I know that there's so many things that kind of went on through these 3 days, but there was a timeshare in Nashville, Tennessee, that my mom and dad actually are members of this timeshare. And my mom and dad went to go get this timeshare for Jenny and the kids and everybody that was visiting, right? And that timeshare, they found out why they were there. And you know, they never charged my mom and dad a thing, not a dime. Um, they completely stayed there until the day that I got to go home, right? So Jenny was at that timeshare with the girls, and I think her sister, whoever. My mom and dad was at the hospital. I come out of the coma, and I was strapped to a bed. When I got electrocuted, it was enough power that I had two fractures, one in my neck, one in my back. So they had me laying flat on a bed, strapped down basically where I couldn't move. And I remember, you know, opening my eyes. I remember seeing a nurse beside me and, you know, feeding tubes and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, can't really talk really well. And I remember just asking, you know, for my dad. And I did that because, you know, and it goes back to what I said very early on. I never realized that I watched my parents, about not ever giving up. You know what I mean? Like, you start thinking like, I mean, my dad was set to go and like, you know, it happened, right? So, I remember asking for them to come in the room, and, they came in the room, sat down next to me, and I asked for my dad, but my dad's like, I ain't going in there by myself. I can't do it, you know? And even before they even put me in that coma, before they did my surgery, they gave the family like, hey, you want to go see him before he goes in, because they didn't know the outcome, right? And my dad was like, no, I ain't going in there. And but my mom and my wife did. So, which I don't remember seeing them. That's before they ever knocked me out. So I wake up, and my mom and dad come in the room. And as soon as they come in, you know, dad just kind of sat there and he was like, hey, listen, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but we've always had faith. And, you know, one way or another, it's going to happen. We just don't know how. And I was like, okay, you know, like, what, you got to get to the point, you know? And he was like, so in order to save your life, they had to amputate both your arms. And, you know, like, you take something like that and it's like, and people ask me all the time, like, what was the first thing you thought? I don't even remember. You know what I mean? Like, I imagine that all my thoughts were like, dang, like, you know, how am I going to do this? Or how am I going to do that? Or, you know, and I know like the kids were in my mind, you know what I mean? Like, you just got this, you got this path, this goal, this plan, this, what you know your life's going to turn out to be and what you want to do, what, you know, the plan that I had for myself. And, man, like, what am I going to do now? You know? And I kind of go back and forth, I know, but I kind of go back to, why did I even work 7 days a week, 12-hour days for the whole year before. And it was a blessing because I almost had my house paid for. I don't blow money, right? So for that year, all that money I was making, I was doing triple payments on my house, right? So the house payments was taken care of. I didn't have to worry about losing my house. You know what I mean? And so there's like huge blessings prior to and it kind of opens your eyes like, man, God had this planned out. Wow, I was working 712s at that time. So Dad told me that. I eventually got my own little room, because I was in ICU whenever I woke up. But I got into the room at the burn unit at Vanderbilt. In the very back of the hospital was like an L-shaped hospital, right, hallway. And I was in the very, very back. And I met my doctor for the first time, Dr. Guy. And he comes in the room with me, he sits down, and I was in there by myself. And he was like, Jason, I want you to know that, dude, you're going to be in this hospital for several months, and I mean, the injuries that you went through, and he explained everything to me, my kidneys and the reason he had to amputate, and he kept them as long as he could. And he literally every single day, I probably had, I don't know how many amputations, because it was like, let's cut a little bit more, just a little bit more. And, so he sat down in there with me and he was like, you know what? When I got this phone call about you, it was on a Saturday. He said, I was at church, and when I hear electrical burns, there ain't very many people that can survive 7,200 volts. He's like, that's rough. So anyway, he sat down with me and he said, I want to know your goals. Like, what do you want to be able to do? And he said, I don't want you to answer that right now. Like, I just want you to think about it, because you're going to be here long enough that I want to help you reach these goals. And I was like, okay. And he stood up and he went to walk out of the room. And I told him, I said, Dr. Guy, I already know what I want. And he was like, how do you know what you want? I mean, you're a 29-year-old man, just lost both your arms, just found out. Like, what do you know? What do you know you want out of life? And I told him, I was like, man, I don't know if I'll ever be able to dress myself or feed myself or do whatever. But I said, I got to be able to hold my kids again. Like, that's all I care about. So he was like, I'll make sure that happens. I said, all right. So I guess it was like the next day, maybe a couple of days later, Dr. Guy comes in my room and he says, hey, your kids are here. I'm going to go get them. I'm going to bring them to your room. I said, no, you're not. And he said, what do you mean I'm not? I said, dude, I don't want them in my room. Like, I had tubes hanging out my arms, didn't have hands. I had feeding tubes, heart monitors. Like, I mean, you just imagine all the stuff that you're hooked up to, right? And I'm like, I want to go to the waiting room. And he said, dude, you can't go to the waiting room. I cannot unplug you from all this stuff. And I told him, I said, you put it in me, you can take it out. And he said, yeah, but if you don't start eating, I got to put this feeding tube back in, and it's not fun, I said, well, that's a chance I'll take. So I talked him into unhooking me from everything that he could unhook me from. And I had wound vacs, and I don't know if you know what a wound vac is, but basically that's tubes hanging out of your arms that sucks the bad stuff out of your arms, right? The infections, and so you're hooked up to 110 plug-ins all the time while this machine is literally sucking stuff out of your arms. And so he pulled my feeding tube was the first thing he did. And I remember, like, a feeding tube looks like a little butterfly wings on it that's down in your stomach. And it goes in through your nose. And I remember feeling that butterfly from my stomach all the way out. And I was like, I'm never going to let that go back in. That ain't happening. And then they pulled my catheter out. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever had a catheter, but it's like, man, they're just hold your breath. It's going to hurt, and it's like, so they start unhooking me. And I kind of had to sit up for a little bit because I hadn't been out of bed in, 4 days. I had to kind of get my balance, and I got in a wheelchair, and I went to the waiting room for the first time. And, here you got Billy Grace, 21 months old, that doesn't know what's going on, but she knows it's different, and she was scared, but Campbell, 3 months old, she ain't got a clue what's going on. And my wife had Campbell and laid her in my arms, and I was like, man, I just did it, you know? So, so that was hard. Yeah. But, um, but I knew that it's like, I just reached my first goal. Man, I usually don't need to do this, but,
You're good.
um, so I reached that first goal, and I just knew that, um, no matter what, and I mean, not knowing was like, it'd be all right. You know what I mean? Like, I'll figure it out. And Dr. Guy was like, man, you're still going to be in here for months, you know? And I was like, no, I'm not, dude. It ain't going to happen. Like, you got the wrong person, man. Like, I'm too strong for you to tell me that I'm going to be gone this long, you know? So, 12 days after my amputation, after the accident, and throughout these 3 days, I was trying to figure out, like, I don't want my wife to feed me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want her to do this stuff. So I remember taking a leg brace that goes above your knee, it goes below your knee, and the little hinge that's at your knee. I remember taking the bottom piece off and duct taping a fork to it. So, you know, whenever you're standing up, you know, it's got like a little spring loaded deal on it. The spring would straighten up, the fork was on it, and I would lean towards the table and the fork would come towards my mouth. And that's how I started feeding myself in the hospital. And I was like, man, I'm going to figure this out. Um, so 12 days after my accident, Dr. Guy comes in the room. He sits down with me and he said, dude, I never imagined that I would ever that I would ever tell you this. But he said, I'm going to let you go home. He said, dude, you have broke like everything that I thought you wouldn't do, you know? And even to the fact where when he told me, he said, your wife has to become a nurse. And I said, well, she's going to then, because I'm ready to go home. And we we get in this hospital. I mean, Dr. Guy tells me, he says, I'm gonna put you in a wheelchair when we go down to the vehicle, and I want to be the one to roll you down to the car. And I said, okay, fair enough. So I remember getting in a wheelchair and coming out of my room, and I told you it's an L-shaped hallway. When I went around that corner, every doctor, every nurse was on both sides, like, you know, they were hugging me, and it was just like, I didn't even know that I was inspiring them, like, because all I was trying to do is live my life. I mean, I wasn't doing it for anybody else but myself, you know? And I was like, man, I touched them like this. Like, it was just so overwhelming. And so we get down to the car. Dr. Guy puts me in, and we go back to Owensboro. And the very first coming into town, like when you come out from Owensboro to Utica, there's a church on the right, and they had changed the sign that said, welcome home, Jason, you know? And I was like, man, I got people like rallying around me. At that time, I don't even know if they do it anymore, but there was a website called Caring Bridge, and people would literally like write encouraging words. And for the 12 days I was there, that's something I looked up. I looked forward every morning to get on the computer and see what everybody was saying. You know what I mean? And every time somebody would say something, it was like a pat on the back. You know, it's like I feel good, like I'm helping them, and with them telling me that I'm helping them, it's helping me, you know? So I get home, and my wife didn't expect us to come home that quick, and we didn't have any groceries, and my mom said, well, I'll sit with Jason while you go to town. So Jenny went to the Walmart or wherever, and I was at home with my mom, and I remember telling my mom, and this was 12 days after the accident, where's the keys to my truck? And she was like, I don't know, on the counter. And I said, can I have them? And she said, why do you want them? And I said, I just want them, and I want to go outside. And she was like, well, I'll just go out there with you. What do you want out of your truck? And I said, I just want my keys, and that's it. I don't want you to go with me. And I went out to my truck, and I got it unlocked, and it might have took me an hour. But I got in my truck, and I drove around my grandfather's farm 12 days after losing my arms. I just stuck my nubs in the steering wheel and went to town, and um, but from that moment on, because I'd already reached that one goal. The only goal I had was holding my kids. That was it. Everything else was going to be bonus, right? So now I drive my truck 12 days later, and then I got people that are just like rallied around me all the time. The community, people bringing food, people just helping us every single day. And I remember my buddy calling me, and because I'm a huge hunter, I love to hunt. And my buddy called me, and he was like, "Hey, turkey season is in April." I said, "Yeah, I know that." And he goes, "We're going turkey hunting this year." And I was like, "Okay." And leading up to that, I was like, I know I'll go. I'll go sit with him. But man, me shooting a gun again ain't never gonna happen. But I even remember a quick story before that one is I remember our first trip going to Owensboro as a family. It was me, Billy, Campbell, and Jenny. And she wanted to go to Hobby Lobby. And Billy Grace, 21 months old, she can walk, right? So I'm like, yeah, we'll go. I hate shopping, but I'm all right with this. So we go into Hobby Lobby, and I have no arms, and I'm carrying Billy Grace in my nubs, and Campbell's in the car seat, and Jenny's shopping. And I'm like, hey, me and Billy Grace are going to go walk around for a little bit. She was like, all right. I said, when you get done, just, come find us. And we were probably 3 or 4 rows over, and it was just me and Billy. And she got to kicking her feet, and I was about to drop her, so I set her on the ground, and she went running away from me. And I remember like looking at her, I was like, Billy Grace, you got to get back over here. And, she got this big smile, and she turned around, she's looking at me, and she's coming running right towards me. And it's almost like a movie, everything's slow motion. I was like, here I was fighting for my life. And now I got this little girl that's fixing to jump in my arms. She loves me. I love her. And when she got up to me, she grabbed me by my pants, and she pulled my pants all the way down to my ankles. And I was like, well, that was a complete horror movie is what that was. So I remember like, Billy Grace, you got to pull my pants up. You got to pull my pants. She ain't having it. So I'm like, I got to find my wife somewhere. So I decided I'm going to go to the outside aisle and try to find her. So, I'm not down the main aisle. And I took off, and here I got these pants down to my ankles. So you can only walk just a few inches at a time. So I get down to the end, and I look down, and I go running, and I finally find Jenny. She's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, dude, Billy pulled my pants down. So she comes running over to me. She pulls them up. She's like, man, that is so embarrassing. In the middle of Hobby Lobby, lost my pants. And I said, it could have been worse. And she said, how can it be worse? And I said, at least my underwear stayed up, the whole time. But so throughout the beginning of this, you got all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, you got failures, and you got things going. And so April comes around, and my buddy Sam calls me. He goes, hey, we're going hunting. I was like, all right. So he said, won't you just come up and spend the night with me? And I was like, okay. But I said, Sam, man, I got an issue because like I can't use the bathroom on my own. You know what I mean? Like there's stuff I can't do. And he said, that's all right. You're like a brother to me, man. I'm going to take care of you, Okay. So I go down, I spend the night with my buddy, and the next day it's going to be turkey season. And I told him, I said, Sam, I'm excited to just be in the woods and be able to sit by you and watch all this happen, And he was like, what do you mean? I said, watch you kill a turkey, man, just as cool as me killing one. And he was like, you're killing one. I'm like, I don't know about that, dude. How can I do it? I ain't got no arms. And he's like, I think I got it figured out. So we were sitting in his living room, and he took the 2 screws out of the butt of the shotgun and put a ratchet strap and ran the screws back in it. He strapped it to my shoulder, and on the front, he had a radiator hose clamp with a tripod on it that was hooked the end of the barrel up, and he tied a string from the trigger, and he stuck it in my mouth. So I was in his living room dry firing this gun, just pulling the trigger, just barely pulling. And I was like, damn, I think I can do this. So the next day we went turkey hunting, and the first turkey I seen, man, it come walking down this trail, and I had to wait till it got in front of the gun, but I barely pulled my chin down, and I shot and I killed my first turkey a month after my accident.
Oh
And
my
then
God.
and then from then on, it was just like every day, I was trying something, and And I mean, it was every single day I was just trying to do something because I wanted to live again. I still wanted to be the same dad that I was before. I still wanted to be able to have those same things that I wanted to be able to do with my kids. And, I was told that I would never have any more kids. Obviously, y'all met my son a minute ago. I got a son now. But so many things that everybody was like, dude, I know you think you can do it, but you're probably not going to be able to do it. Doctors were calling my wife and saying, hey, listen, your husband is going to hit a low point at some point. I mean, he's 29. He just lost 2 arms, and something he's done for 29 years of, what it feels like to go inside your pocket and get a quarter out, or what's it feel like just to touch somebody's skin? You know what I mean? Like, it's totally different. And like, those emotions are really going to get to him, and you're going to have to be watching him because, like, suicide, he's going to think about suicide. It's just going to happen. And I am 18 years or 19 years, whatever, 2008 to now. I've never had that thought. Like, I've always been that, I'm happy and grateful to be alive. And, so then I told my wife, I started looking at prosthetics, found out about the bionic hand. I called a prosthetist and he's like, dude, you'll never get those bionic hands. I said, why? And he said, because they're too expensive, just won't happen. I said, well, let's try. And I got denied. I got denied multiple times. I found out the doctor that said I was not medically necessary for me to have prosthetics. And I called him and I was like, dude, won't you come to my house and let me tie your hands behind your back for 24 hours? Hell, I'll let do it 2 hours and tell me why I don't deserve to have hands. And so I started fighting the case that, and I didn't know what the hands could do. Like, really, am I ever going to be able to do what I used to do? I don't know. But again, it goes back to, and this is what I told them. If I can hold my kid's hand to walk across the street, I deserve that, right? I'm a dad and I deserve that. And I guess that kind of pulled a few heartstrings, and I became the first person in the world with 2 bionic hands. I got home and I told my wife, I said, the only other upper limb amputee in the entire world was my grandfather. And there is nobody else in the world that's ever lost an arm but him, because I've never seen it before. And I didn't realize how many people really are out there that's missing a limb, an upper limb. There's a lot of lowers, but I felt like I was the only one in the world because my granddad already died. And I remember telling my wife, it's like, you know what? If anybody ever loses their hand ever again, I want to be that mentor for them. I want to be there for them. I want to help them. And that's my goal. And I told her, I said, I want to be the best prosthetic user in the world, which again, I thought that was going to be easy to do because I was the only one like this. You know what I mean? So I started working once I got the prosthetics really, really hard, trying to figure out my life again and what I could do. And I just, every single day, it was just something every single day. And then once I got the bionic hands and in a small hometown, I was in the newspaper and in the news every single day, it seemed like. And eventually, CNN picked up on it, and they asked me if they could share my story on CNN, and they did. And the next day, it was on repeat all day long. My story was on CNN, and people started reaching out to me from all over the world, man, other amputees and prosthetists and therapists and just like doctors. I mean, all these people were reaching out to me as, man, how'd you get those hands and how are you using them so good? And it opened up this door of like, man, there's other people out here like me. And I've even had people that are just missing fingers reach out to me. And I'm like, I don't want them to feel like, oh, he lost 2 hands. I can't call that dude. I feel bad calling him because I only lost 1 finger or 2 fingers. No, I want them to call me because they lost something. I don't care how much you lost. You still lost something. And I want them to reach out to me. So people started reaching out to me and I started helping a lot of different people. And then all of a sudden, I got a phone call from a girl in Hawaii. And this girl, she was like, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your bionic hands. I was like, all right. She said, can you hold a coffee cup? And I said, yeah. And then she was like, can you write your name? I said, yeah. She said, can you hold a gun? I said, yeah, but what do you do? Because these are weird questions. Most people were asking me how I dress myself, feed myself. And she was like, well, I can't really tell you what I need to do. So anyway, long and short, she said, can we do a Zoom call? And I'd never been on FaceTime or anything with anybody. And I said, yeah. So the next day we get on this FaceTime Zoom call and all these people in this room. And it was a lady from Hawaii Five-0. So they asked me to do an episode on Hawaii Five-0 called the Hookman episode. So I was a bad guy and I killed a bunch of people and they couldn't find my fingerprint.
Oh my gosh.
And I tell my daughter's boyfriends, I tell them that all the time. I don't have fingerprints, so you gotta watch it. So I go to Hawaii and I'm on Hawaii Five-0 for the first time, being around celebrities and actors, and I got to work with RoboCop from the 80s.
Jeez.
Long and short, he and I became really close because I was his double, and so I spooned Peter Weller for 2.5 weeks, and so we became really good friends. And so anyway, I got home from that, and he found out that there's new bionic hands out. He called the bionic hand company. He got me. Now I'm an ambassador for the bionic hand company, so I became the first person for a second time. Now I'm on my 5th generation, so I've been the first person in the world 5 times now. I've been on Dr. Gupta, Good Day Philadelphia, did a movie with Matthew McConaughey, did an Apple commercial. I've done a MetLife commercial. I did a commercial in Florida for Advent Health. I've been in the Associated Press, magazines, wrote my first book. All these things just happened because of opportunities, and really not even opportunities, but it was a mindset of like, I want to get through this, and having the faith, knowing that God's got this plan the whole time. So, Peter Weller, and this is kind of a quick story, but Peter Weller actually called me one day and he said, hey, I want to come to Owensboro and I want to spend the weekend with you. So before he came, Axel was born. I climbed up in the attic and I found my toy box, and there were some cars in there that I was going to give Axel. And when I opened it up, the first thing on the top was a poster of RoboCop that I saved from the 80s. And I was like, the dude's coming to my house. You know what I mean? And when he came to my house and spent the weekend with me, I asked him, I said, dude, why'd you come to Owensboro? And he said, because I needed to surround myself with people you surround yourself with. He said, dude, you've inspired me so much that I need what you got in your life. And it really made me realize, you talk to celebrities, you talk to athletes and people that are in front of the eyes of millions of people that you think they got it all. They got the money, they got the fame, they got the followers, they got all this cool stuff. And he needed something that I got that he can't find. You know what I mean? And that hit me like, man, that's super cool. It's just so humbling. And me and him talk weekly almost, unless he's out of the country or whatever. And I became friends with a lot of those guys. And then I got asked, and you got to remember from day one, I'm never going to be able to dress myself, feed myself. I can do all that stuff. And then they asked me to do this celebrity softball tournament in Dallas, Texas. And they make me a prosthetic to catch a softball and a way to throw a softball and a way to hit the bat. And, I show up and Zeke Elliott from the Cowboys is on my team. And, I mean, all these super cool, Michael Irving's on my team, Cody Jinks, country music artists, baseball players, basketball players, the Gronkowski brothers. And I was like, man, I can't believe I'm out here with all these people. And the first ball that gets hit, I said, put me in right field. That's where I want to go. First ball comes to right field. Like, crap. So I just hold my arm up in the air and it goes right in the glove. And Zeke Elliott comes over there, smacks me on the butt, and he's like, dude, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. I was like, well, that was luck. That's all that was luck. So, my life has really just, again, I had a plan that I was going to be in the construction field, own this company my dad started, just an everyday wake up, 7 to 3:30, 7 to 5 type of guy, and live my life, go home at night. To what it's opened up to has been so humbling and so mind blowing that I have met, I'm not bragging about this by any means, I've met famous people, rich people, poor people, different colors of skin, different sizes, different different countries. Like, I have met so many people, and I've started to realize that if this world would just become one, because we all need each other. And I really think that Peter Weller story is really what hit me so much, because if we could all just love each other and not worry about the money and the fame and poorness or whatever it is, and just say, hey, I want to be a friend. I want to, I want to love on you. And man, this world be such a better place. You know what I mean? Just, I know before this started, you talked about political things. It's like, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, independent, don't vote. I don't care. You know what I mean? It's like, we got to quit thinking about nothing but what God has always intended us to do, is love on each other. Love your neighbor.
That's it. And that's the answer to all of it, really. And it seems so simple, but it's so hard to do, and it doesn't need to be.
Yep.
But I was, as you're telling your story and stuff, I had this thought or this image come into my head when you were electrocuted, right? Initially, you just thought you were going to lose a thumb. Mm-hmm. And so the outside appearance, right? You couldn't look at yourself and see or know how damaged you were, right? So, I obviously don't know exactly what you looked like, but from the sounds of it, your wife went to the hospital and she's like, why are we here? Like, he's just going to lose a thumb or whatever, And the doctors, obviously, because of their medical profession and their background and stuff, knew that there's a lot more going on inside than what the eye could see. And I was just thinking that everybody around us that we look at, no matter what their outward appearance is, we have no idea what's going on the inside. No idea, and it can be, obviously this, our platform is spiritual, right? And there's a lot of spiritual warfare going on out there, and we have no idea what people are going through spiritually. Or, even I'm the kind of person that I know everything revolves around the spiritual. That's just kind of how I am, so when we go through really hard things, and for you, just your outlook and your positivity and being able to move forward with a positive outlook, to me, that proves that spiritually you were sound. You know what I mean? Yep. And even though physically you were really damaged, your spirit was in a pretty good place. Yep. And that can be hard for people to be. I haven't always been there, right? Yep. I'm very religious and spiritual, but there's been times that I've lacked in that department in my life. And so it sounds like that's kind of the secret, right?
Me sharing my story, a lot of people don't want to share their story, right? Whether they don't think they have a story, they just don't ever want to talk about it. They don't want to relive what they went through. And I feel like God puts us all in a spot with a story, because we all have one that He wants us to share them, right? And I don't know, sometimes I try to think about other people's thoughts. Sometimes I try to, what would it be like to be them? And I've done a speech before, and a guy comes up to me, or a girl, I don't even remember what it was, but a person comes up to me and they said, I want you to know that I've never been able to believe. Like, how can you prove to me? Now, you believe this, right? So this is not, I'm just telling you what they said to me. How can you prove to me that God walked on the water? Like, do you have a picture of it? Do you have a video of it? Yeah, it's in the Bible, but who wrote the Bible? You know what I mean? Right. All the amazing stories that's in the Bible, like, everybody's like, prove it to me. And the guy told me, he's like, man, I've never been able to believe any of that. But then I hear a story like yours, and there's only one way that you could get past and through what you went through. And it kind of really opened my eyes up to that there really is a God out there. You know what I mean? And
Oh yeah.
you think about how many people that could be out there that just don't believe those amazing stories. And they don't ever get an opportunity to see something that has been amazing in a real person's life. And I think that's why I love sharing my story so much. You know what I mean? Because, man, I mean, how you going to go through a 7,200 volts, should have killed me, kidney shutting down, to still being awake, making it to the hospital awake, waking up. I have a picture of me when I woke up in the hospital with tubes hanging out of my arms with a smile on my face. Without saying a word, like if somebody sees that picture, it's like, how's the dude even got a smile on his face? You know what I mean? Like how, because I'm thankful to be alive. And, and at that moment, and I've said it multiple times in this, at that moment, this has definitely not been my plan, but God has made this plan out for me my entire life. He's gotten me ready for this. And then people's like, would you ever go back to March 1st, 2008? You never got on that four-wheeler, never went on that four-wheeler ride. And I tell them I absolutely would not, because I feel like now I have not that I didn't feel like I had a purpose then, but I truly wake up in the mornings and I feel like I have a purpose. I have, like, this is what I was supposed to be able to do. And people see that and like, man, how can you be thankful that you don't have your arms? And it's not really that, but it's like God's done a lot of stuff in my life.
I think one of the most remarkable things that I have witnessed with you is that, like, at least I didn't coming here before and not really knowing your story or the things that you've been able to do, to be able to hear all the things that you have been able to do and still, like, know that you are seriously so humble. Like, it hasn't really changed that son that you were, the farmer or the person that, you were before. It's just enhanced. Yep. And I just think that it's remarkable because in the things that you've been able to do, the places that you've been able to go, the people that you've been able to meet, that could change someone, but you are literally, like, seriously so humble, and I can't thank you enough. Like, it just is an honor for us to be able to speak to you and have you on our podcast. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about it before about all the miracles in the Bible and stuff. And it's so easy for us now. All of that was over 2,000 years ago, right? And like you said, people can look at that and be like, that's just a story in a book. That never happened. Or why don't those things happen now? And man, I'm here to tell you, you're here to tell everybody that those miracles do happen. Yep. Still. God is still here performing miracles in our lives.
Yep.
We have angels all around us all the time that avoid or help keep us safe from time to time, I believe. There's multiple times where, who knows, a light all of a sudden turns red and we're upset because I missed a green light when, who knows, that could have saved my life, and just stuff like that all the time. And I so badly want people to look around in their life and to be able to see God in their life and recognize that, man, he loves me. And even though he loves me, he can't force me to do things, right? Yep. Just like you, he put all of those things in your life to be able to help you, to prepare you for this accident. And you could have sat there and just sulked and been upset and been angry. Instead, you were able to look at, oh, God was preparing me, right? Now I need to go and do what God needs me to go and do. Mm-hmm. And when we can do that as human beings, and I mean, look at the impact that you've had in people's, in my life already. I've talked to you for the first time 8 days ago or something, and man, I love you. And I'm so glad to know you and to see that you're just glorifying God in your life and in your story.
Yep. One verse that always got me was John 13:7. And he says, "You may not understand now, but one day you will." Like, man, that gives you hope that, do I even understand why my accident happened? Like, I feel like I do, but maybe I don't yet. Maybe there's so much more to come. Out of all out of all the amazing things that's already happened, maybe there's triple that coming. You know what I mean? Like,
I have a feeling, yeah.
it's I don't know. And then when you talk about like angels, and my wife don't like being on TV or on stuff like this. I think she would do it, but you think about like her being my angel, like you have no idea the divorce rate in amputees. It's way up there. So my wife was 28 years old whenever I got hurt, with two daughters. And really, the easiest thing that she could have done was like, I didn't sign up for this, and I'm out. I can find somebody else. I'm young, pretty, like I'm out. But instead, for a year, she she would feed Billy Grace or Campbell, then she'd feed Billy, then she'd feed me. My food was cold, but then she'd feed herself. You know what I mean? Like, I know her food was cold, but then she would give one bath, another bath, my bath, and then she was like, "I just want to go to bed. I don't even care if I take a shower." And so, like, a year of this, she was not even my wife. She was my caretaker. That was it. So you think, even that being hard on a marriage? I mean, it was hard, you know, but we're still together. So I must have done something right.
It's that charm.
Yeah. She's definitely an angel.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
Definitely. Hey, before we ask you our final question, can you show everybody your arm?
Yes. So here's my bionic hand. I got pictures of my kids on it. The hand works off my muscles, and I got wrist rotators. So it's a totally different muscle that makes it do that. And then on the left side, I actually got a TD, which is a myoelectric hook. And that's just small to get inside my pocket. That's why I wear this. Pictures of my kids. So I designed my own arms. I travel the world now, show people how prosthetic works, or share my story, or do podcasts. and one of these days, you should talk to my wife, because I think, man, she's got a pretty big story too.
We would absolutely love to have her on.
Sounds like we got part 2 coming up.
Yeah.
Just from the things that she's seen, that the decisions she had to make. Just like when they asked her, "Do you want to sign these papers? Because if you don't, he's going to die." And the first thing she said was, "My kids without a dad or my kids with a dad? Easy. Sign away." And even Dr. Guy, when he came down to the waiting room to tell my wife that he had to amputate both my arms, there was 50, 60 people from Owensboro, 2 hours away, that was in the waiting room. And he walked down, and he even sat down and started crying. And he said, "Sometimes I come to waiting rooms and there's nobody here waiting on somebody. And you got all these people from 2 hours away." And he says this in my book. He says, "I knew that I was working on a special person." And just like Peter Weller said, he needed to surround himself with people like.
Oh,
You okay?
yeah, no. I am not.
Yeah, that's incredible. Everybody needs more good people in their life.
Yep.
So, well, I'd love for you to, before we leave, I'd love for you to tell everybody something that you know to be true.
I know that Jesus has a great plan for each and every one of us, even through the bad times. And I think that's the hardest thing to even wrap your mind around, is how much of an accident or something really, really bad can be such a blessing.
Amen.
You're the man.
So
You are such a blessing to so many people. We're so thankful for you being on the show.
Well,
so thankful. Yep. We appreciate it. And we'll do our best to get his wife on here also.
Yes. You'll have to bug her, but she'll probably do it.
And we need to get your book title. So
can you tell everybody where they can find your book?
Yeah, so on my website, you can go to www.jasonkoger.com. So it's JASONKOGER. And then you can get the book there. They also on Amazon too, but my website's probably a little bit easier maybe. And the name of the book, I didn't even tell you the name of the book. Handed a Greater Purpose.
Oh, wow.
Love it.
I love that. We'll have it in the show notes. So,
Yep. All right. Thanks again, Jason.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Angels Among Us. You can find us on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow along for more stories of everyday miracles and reminders that angels are among us. If you have a story to share, please email or DM us with a brief summary. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, when we are waiting, God is working.